Welcome to lesson 8.7, solving quadratic equations by using square roots. In this section, we'll go over some mastery review notes and we'll complete some of the problems together. Now, when we're solving for square roots, we're going to always get the x squared value by itself. Let me zoom in here a little bit. So as we can see here, for the example of x squared equals 36. To solve for this, we have to take the square root of both sides. Now the square of a square root just goes away. That's what they're showing right here. It just becomes x. And when we're solving for square root values, we're going to have a plus and a minus sign. Now word problems, sometimes we only take the positive root. Sometimes a negative root is okay as well. But most of the time, it'll just be the positive root that we will be concerned with. Now for this one value, we got two answers. X equals plus or minus 6. If you plug in positive 6 right here into the x squared, we will get 36. And 36 does equal 36. If we plug in minus 6 squared, we'll still get a 36. And 36 equals 36. So both values do check. And that's what they showed over here on the right side of the page. Now for the next example. 2x squared plus 7 equals 207. We first subtract 7 from both sides. Once we subtract 7 from both sides, we have 2x squared equal to 200. Now we divided both sides by 2, and then we get x squared equal to 100. And then we take the square root of both sides. Of course, you write a plus or minus in front, and the square root of 100 is 10. Now we'll look at a couple examples here. Number 1, x squared equals 81. Well, we're just going to take the square root of both sides. And the square root of x squared is just x. And this will equal plus or minus the square root of 81. And of course, the square root of 81 is just plus or minus 9. So that would be the final answer, plus or minus 9. For number 2, we take the square root of both sides, and we'll get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 9, which of course is plus or minus 3. Now let's look at number 3. We get x squared equals negative 64. If you enter this in a calculator and you'll find out the square root of a negative number, it'll say error. We cannot take the even roots. Even roots are square roots. And square roots have like a little imaginary 2 written up here, but we don't have to write it. We just use the word square root. Of course, we also have cube roots, and there's also fourth roots. But no even roots. We cannot take the even root of any negative number. It'll be an error. But there is something called imaginary numbers, which will be coming up later. So for now, if we didn't calculate, it would say error. But I want you to actually write it properly. We're going to start using imaginary numbers. Take the square root of both sides, and we're going to get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 64. Let me break it down here first for imaginary numbers. Excuse me. I separated it. By definition, imaginary numbers, we use the letter I. By definition, is the square root of negative 1. And the square root of negative 1 is just simply I. So this just becomes I times 8. So write the final answer is plus or minus 8I. We're just getting ahead of ourselves by just a couple lessons. But imaginary numbers are going to become very common soon. When you get a little farther into algebra and geometry, you'll be using imaginary numbers a lot. And we'll explain that in another lesson, what imaginary numbers mean when you're actually graphing quadratics. The imaginary numbers actually tell us something about when we're graphing. Now for another example, we're going to subtract 44 from both sides. And we get x squared is equal to 188 minus 44, which equals 144. You take the square root of both sides, and x would equal plus or minus 12. Now for these examples here, for number 5, let's see, I want you to continue this one on your own. Most of these other ones are going to be fine. I want you to complete these on your own. The only thing I want to talk about here is going to be number 12 here. So for 12, we subtract 200 from both sides, and we get minus 3x squared is equal to minus 192. We're going to divide both sides by negative 3, and we will get x squared is equal to negative 192 divided by minus 3. And that'll give us a positive 64. We now take the square root of both sides, and we'll get x is equal to plus or minus 8. Now let's go to the other side of the sheet here. I'm reviewing for mastery. Now this is a little calculator section, and I don't mind if you use a calculator here for these parts for breaking down the radicals, especially on word problems. We actually need to break down. Sometimes the numbers won't make sense. If you say the answer is 4 square root of 3, you don't really know what that value means. So we're actually going to be entering in the values here. Let's see. So for number 13, now this will be a calculator section. So x squared is equal to 50. We take the square root of both sides, and we'll get x is equal to plus or minus the square root of 50. And we can just enter this value into a calculator. And that'll equal, it says round to the nearest hundredth, which is 2 decimal places. It'll be plus or minus 7 point, let me see here, I have to use a little calculator here, 7.07, because it's 2 decimals because it's the 100th place. That would be the answer. Just continue on with numbers 14 and 15 in the same manner. Now number 16, I do want to talk about together. It says here, number 16, a triangle has a base that is 3 times the height, and the area of the triangle is 63 centimeters squared. It says find the height of the triangle. Round your answer to the nearest tenth of a centimeter. So we're going to have area is equal to 1/2 base times height. Now it says in the problem the base is equal to 3 times the height. And we'll use this little substitution here, 3 times the height. We're just going to plug it in where the base is right here. So the area becomes 1/2 the base, which is 3h, times h. And this will equal 3/2 h squared. We know the area is going to be 63 square centimeters. So now we're just going to solve for h. To solve for h squared, we're just going to multiply both sides by the reciprocal 2/3. So 63 times 2/3. Well, I can reduce 3 goes into 63 21 times. And 21 times 2 is 42. Now to solve for the height, we have to take the square root. Really, it's plus or minus the square root of 42. And the square root of 42 is about 6.5 centimeters. Now, we can't write it as a negative, because if I plug it back in, we can't have a negative height of a triangle. So we just found out that the height is 6.5 centimeters. And that is the answer for number 16. Now let's look at number 17. It says here, the length of a rectangle is 4 times its width. So let's draw a rectangle here. I'll call W for the width, and the length is going to be 4 times its width. We know the area is a function of length times width. And instead of length, we'll call it 4W times W. Length times width. So the area would be 4W squared. And we know the area is equal to 850 square inches. Now we just have to solve for the W. We'll divide both sides by 4. So 850 divided by 4 is about 212.5. Now to solve, we're just going to take the square root. W is equal to the square root of 212.5 centimeters. And the square root of this, let's see, what would that be? Don't have my calculator with me, so I'll just type it in to Microsoft. About 14.6. 14.6. 14.6 inches, rounded to the nearest tenth of an inch. So we found the width. Now it didn't ask, if we asked for the length of course would be 4 times the width. 4 times 14.6 inches. So let's see, what would the length be? 4 times 6 is 24. We carry the 2. 16 plus 2 is 18. Carry the 1 and a 5. So the length would be 58.4 inches. I understand it did not say, but in most problems are going to be asked to identify the length and the width. Well, that is it for this section of 8-7 Mastery Notes, solving quadratic equations by using square roots.